And Corbin, before you start, we are streaming? Okay, thank you.
Well, first off, thanks for having me, and I'll tell you that the audit went very well in terms of the process of the audit. The staff did a wonderful job of getting things together. We probably had fewer recommended adjusting entries this year than we've had in a while. So we're really pleased with the responsiveness of staff and the city in getting information to us. The audit report itself is 154 pages long. So we're gonna go over the cliff notes tonight, or what we used to call the cliff notes. I don't know what they call them these days, but when I was a kid, what we called the cliff notes. And so you should have a small handout in front of you that says audit presentation.
Not all that many years ago, it's all this new stuff, LOTA and all the personnel items.
Yeah, we've really, accountants have really given you so much information now in an audit that it's overwhelming. I think it's almost too much to try to get through one of them. That's why I try to put most of it in the cliff notes here, as I call them. And so you should all have a copy of the presentation. And I know it's going to be hard to see the numbers on the screen, but I'll kind of just walk you through this on page one, and you can see the governmental funds total fund balance $4.3 million. General fund dropped down to just under 2.3 million at the end of 23. And governmental funds are basically all your funds except for water, sewer, electric, garbage, funds that are generating revenue for service. Of that balance of $4.3 million in your governmental funds, you can see that blue highlighted line, about $66,000 of that is unrestricted or undesignated, that just for general purposes. And you can see it's been just under $100,000, or just add $100,000 for the last 3 years. I will tell you, one of the things, I think some of the amount listed as restricted, particularly related to fire funds, we may be able to say that money spent on a fire truck, we can move that out of restricted and move it to unrestricted, but that does take action. The next couple lines down, we just show the total liabilities at $57 million, and that includes the school board, and the reason I included them in there is because your debt per capita, the comparative numbers from the state are going to include school boards. And I will tell you that fund balance for 2023, that $4.3 million, or if you want to look at the general fund of $2.3 million, that was really possible by a transfer from the enterprise funds, water, sewer, electric, about $4.3 million. About $4 million of that came from electric alone. And so we're going to see a corresponding decrease in their net position. Long-term liabilities, $57 million on a per capita basis, which is kind of the gray line at the bottom, just under $3,400. The one number that's actually not a financial number here that really jumps off the page at you, the Radford University enrollment dropped from 9,400 on campus back in 2013 to 2023. We're at 4,938. That's the most recent data they had on their website for enrollment on campus. And you kind of think of a city or a town, you build your infrastructure to support so many people. So if you're supporting 20,000 people with your infrastructure, and you can't go undo roads. You can't just pick them up and move them away, or water lines or sewer lines or electric lines or anything like that. So if you have infrastructure in place to serve 20,000 people, and then you're suddenly serving fewer than that, even 18,000 or 17,000, that cost just has to be spread out among fewer people. The maintenance cost, the operations cost, and ultimately capital replacement cost just get spread out over fewer people. And what that means effectively is that over a longer period of time, rates have to go up at a percentage. It's a little greater than inflation to keep up with that decline in population. But that Radford University enrollment is really the one that jumps out, because based on my calculations, that's dropped about 48% since 2013, and that's a pretty significant drop. The good number there is that debt per capita. If we go back 2 years, we can see the state average for cities was over twice as much as what Radford City has. So the good news is your debt levels are not excessive. And I'll kind of extrapolate a few other things later on. The next page.
Before we go on, just real quick on two things on that. In 21, that's when we first borrowed the money for the school system, correct? And that's why we had the jump up in the debt per capita? Yeah.
Yeah.
How come, Right, so when we went to McCarg, how come we dropped
That much?
that much in just 1 year? I get where we went up, but it doesn't make sense that it would drop and then go back up.
If I hadn't just finished up some analyticals for you, I don't know if I'd be able to answer that, but your pension liabilities dropped down, including the school board's pension liabilities.
Okay, so that's factored into that, and that's the big changer on that.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Okay. And then I would want to come back to that fire truck piece that you talked about. I know you mentioned that, and you're going to bring that up later in your comments, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
So page 2, I'm just graphing out some information for the enterprise funds. And David may remind me when the plant here moved. They were a big user of electricity in 2013. So you can see that electric fund in 2013 had a net position of just under 16 million. Today, it's dropped all the way to about $3.4 million. So you lost that major industrial user, and that has had an impact that's kind of been dragging out over a long period of time. When we look at net position for water, sewer, electric fund, and the solid waste fund, net position is your total assets, and that's depreciated assets of your systems, water and sewer lines and that sort of thing, minus total liabilities of each system. So that's net position. So that is not like fund balance. Fund balance is closer to cash basis accounting. Net position is full accrual accounting. So if you look at the water and sewer fund, a lot of that asset balance is made up of water and sewer lines that you can't dig up and sell. So just keep that in mind. And I'm really going to graph out some of those revenue and expenditure lines on the next couple pages. Here's unrestricted governmental funds, and you can see where it's gone since 2013. It's dropped. Had a couple up years in 18 and 19, and then it's kind of continued the downward trend.
And I don't mean to interrupt again here. When we had our budget plan this last year, we thought we were going to add to the general reserves this year, and then that didn't end up happening.
When you look at this, you can see the
Right.
the drop-off that had occurred.
Right.
Well, is there any indication that we know of for the electric fund to drop basically in half between 2022 and 2023? Looking at that, I'm looking at the number where it was 6.6 in 2022, and then we're looking at 3.3.
That was the transfer, is that?
Is that the transfer?
That's
Okay.
yeah, the electric fund, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, the transfer was about $4 million this year, I think, if I'm correct.
Remember, and I know for new council members, just as a reminder, just correct me if anything I say or if I get something.
Okay.
Just remember that one of the things, because of the size of our community, because we have about 50% of our property tax, we're $1.2 billion in valuation. About half of that amount, you've got another almost half as much that is non-taxable. So because of that non-taxable, the theory has been for decades, you've used your enterprise funds, because everybody pays an electric bill, everybody pays a water bill, everybody pays a sewer bill and sanitation to help. We have been trying to transition away from that transfer because utility accounts are not what they used to be.
Right.
When the community was growing, you had lots of revenue coming in, you had the large businesses, that revenue was pretty strong, and that $4 million, it was as high as $5 million, if I recall. at one
I
time,
think so.
Dropped down to 4 and got it down to the lowest was is really, departments are profitable, what that transfer is really profitability to be able to support the general fund. Go to looking at what's in the general fund, if you look at the budget, that first section, which is general property taxes, is about your biggest area that you can go. There's only a few things there, the taxes, the personal property, and meal sales, lodging. Meals and sales, lodging is $1 billion plus number. So just a quick commercial break there for a moment, as a reminder that that's what happens in that transfer. So year to year, when you look back at history, it was generally
There we go.
$3.5 million. We've got to $5 million. We've been able to dial it back, and we're now
It was right at $4 million, yeah.
$4 million
The next page is just, and remember, unrestricted net position, or I'm sorry, net position, this is total net position, for the water, sewer, and solid waste fund. That's the value of the entire system with your assets being depreciated at original cost. So, and you can almost see those transfers from the electric fund, as you see the decrease in net position there. And a little bit of that in the water and sewer fund as well, but the transfers aren't as significant out of the water and sewer fund. You see water and sewer operating activity. I'm just graphing out operating revenues and operating expenditures. This is before the transfers, okay? So this is just operating. Those transfers are considered non-operating. Operating expenditures are now above revenues for the water and sewer fund. And you can see the water and sewer fund, the revenues have just been pretty much flat, going all the way back to 2015 or so, pretty much just haven't increased over that period of time. And you got a slow increase in expenditures. For the electric fund, you can see a big drop-off when the foundry left. And then you can see those expenditures kind of bottomed out in 17 and have slowly started to come back up. And it's next to impossible to keep expenditures from growing at least 2 or 3% a year, provided you don't make some serious cuts. Inflation is just going to eat away at you over time.
All for water and sewer, we did those rate increases for current year to bring that blue line back up to red line. It has been a number of years, that last bump up was a good number. Also, these are reflecting that, started off that loss of population that are buying our utilities,
Yeah.
using utilities.
Yeah, you're definitely fighting that trend on the revenue side. The next page, I'd really just take your assessed values. These are assessed values for real estate, personal property, public service corporations, graphed out over a number of years. You can see the blue line near the top is real estate. We have to divide that by 10 because that assessment is so large relative to everything else. Just keep that in mind. The second line, personal property, if you've tried to buy a car lately or a used car, you've seen the prices are just through the roof. So there was I want to say 32 or 38% increase in those assessed values, believe it or not. I expect that to come back down. I don't know if it's going to come back down next year or when. If it doesn't, it's going to flatten out and probably be flat for an extended period of time. Machinery, tools, and furniture and fixtures, there's been this kind of a slow trend down up until 2020, then a slight trend up. And public service corporation assessments, that's going to be railroads, gas lines, things like that, that public service companies have, where they have infrastructure in the community. Those assessments haven't grown significantly, going back all the way to 2003. And what I'll tell you, what we saw after the Great Recession was we saw a ramp up in federal funding. Of course, you received ARPA funds, CARES funds. School boards received a lot of money too. What we saw after that was a drop off in that federal aid, that it dropped back actually below, in most cases, where it was before the Great Recession. And then it was just flat. I mean, it didn't budge for probably 10 years. And then we have, the pandemic, and it goes back up. So we expect to see that kind of decrease again. So I would expect federal aid at the school board particularly to drop off significantly and flatten out for an extended period of time. State aid, we saw something similar. I was just looking at a locality with state aid, and just 3 years ago, their state aid got back to where it was in like 2006, 2007. So they had a ramp up, state aid had a ramp up, and also then a decrease down, and then a slow climb back. And it took them, 13, 14 years to get back to where they were. So I don't know if we're going to see that with state aid this time because there was just so much federal stimulus, but we just don't know what's going to happen because the state is impacted by the federal government. And invariably, when they get hit with something, they push those liabilities down to the local government, if you will. The next page, just part of the audit, we come out with some audit recommendations. And in the back of the audit, we do have a finding back there that says we recommended some journal entries. But like I said at the beginning, there were fewer than what we've seen in the past, and the staff did a great job. With as complicated as these things are, we're going to have journal entries. So pretty much every locality has that comment. The few that don't hire a CPA to come in before the auditors come in and almost do a pre-audit of all the numbers. So I'm not suggesting you do that at all, because you guys we don't have that many entries here. The management comments or recommendations, fire program funds, I mentioned earlier, you're carrying over a balance there. You get those monies every year from the state, and then you report back to them what you've spent. You bought a fire truck a couple years ago, and I think you financed it, if I remember correctly. I think that would be probably an allowable cost, and right now we've got this money designated in your financial statements, but we probably could use some of that and move it to undesignated, just report it to the state.
Well, let me ask you, what does that look like? How much would we be talking about in that situation? Would it be the whole 680, or would we just be talking about 67?
No, I think it would be closer to the 680, yeah.
So if we chose to do that, what would be the downside of doing that? That's simply an accounting issue.
Yeah, that's just an accounting issue. There's no real downside to that. You're just moving it from designated to undesignated, really.
And that's the money we're using to pay the debt? Is that the money we're using to pay the debt for the fire truck? Right. So I just want to get a clarity on that. I'm sure we all probably do. So if we chose to make this unrestricted, we would still have to keep that balance at a certain level to be able to pay the debt on the fire truck should something occur that we would have to dip into the unrestricted funds, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just, you're just moving it from undesignated to, or restricted to unrestricted.
Okay.
Budget to actual,
Rare occasion, y'all pull some money, every once in a while, we call it an appropriation.
Right.
Call it, fire trucks, those are very expensive.
Well, that,
Is there any reason we can't move it to the general fund, and then if those expenditures?
appropriate back.
Yeah, just appropriate it as we
Exactly,
need it,
exactly, yeah.
But then we can use it for whatever priorities.
Does that help our cash flow? Having that in unrestricted funds?
No.
Should cash flow get tight?
no, it's not gonna.
Okay.
It's more, it's on your instead of 82,000, whatever it is on your unrestricted.
Exactly.
So you'd have, 750,000.
But it's not gonna increase your cash by that amount, so it's not gonna help your cash flow.
No, I get that, but does it put us in a position that we're able temporarily to pay some additional bills and then refund that amount?
All bills are current, so it's.
No, I know, but like what hit us this past summer with the cash flow piece?
Yeah.
Unrestricted, at any point, funds are appropriate, whether it's.
Yeah,
Is this entire amount, is it already earmarked, or is there money there that's not earmarked? How much of that we know is already spent, that we already have expenditures?
On the fire truck.
on the fire
yeah,
truck?
I think at the end of the day, you got this grant money automatically, you get it every year, and you have to spend an allowable cost. You've incurred allowable cost, but you just haven't reported that back to the state. So as soon as you report that back to the state, then, because you can save up, let's say I think you get $67,000, $68,000 a year. You probably have $100,000 easily a year in allowable cost. So, you're building up a balance, but you really don't need to. You're saying we're going to use local dollars on that instead of the grant we got.
Right.
But we may as well just go ahead and use the grant.
Okay. Well, it's something I guess we'll revisit, right?
Honestly, just that benefit, fire trucks have gotten so expensive, so that's kind of. Hey, I mean, you're almost, like I said. We don't have much left. We've got one fire truck that's almost paid for now.
That's it, pretty much, the big expenses.
Yeah, I mean, I just look at the overall debt. I mean, I reconcile everything, but,
So I understand it. So this amount that's sitting there, we've actually, the city side has already paid
exactly.
for these things. So if we can keep it there, I don't want to say a slush fund, but then if we need another truck, then it's there. Or we move it to the general fund where we can prioritize the city needs as they become present and still give it back if necessary.
Right.
Okay.
It effectively keeps you from running into, or hopefully keeps you from going into a negative undesignated balance
We always have
expense, yeah.
your public safety side. You know, the children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it hasn't been, you know, used. All have to be part of it.
And there are very few grants that you get, the highway maintenance funds, you just get those a quarterly appropriation from the state. These funds come, I think, once a year from the state. Most grants are reimbursement based, that you spend the money, then you seek reimbursement. These, they give you up front and you track how you're spending the money. So, and then you report back to the state how you spend it.
We just need to report back.
You just report back that you've spent it and this is how you spent it, and we can move that to undesignated. I mean, what you probably don't want is to have a negative undesignated balance at the end of the
Right.
year. So,
But there's not 680 liquid cash sitting there, right?
It's not going to impact, exactly.
restricted, unrestricted. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just how you're classifying in the equity section.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's already accounted for, so it's not like that plus this. You're just
Right.
moving it, make minus this plus that as y'all know for the accounting side. And the fund has gone up, listen, I just talked, it was around $64,000 a year, it's gone up to about.
It's not nearly enough.
Fire operations, but.
The next one, budget actual reports, just making sure the budget adjustments are put into the system kind of as they occur, so you kind of get a real-time update on how you're doing against your budget. You know, ultimately, the report we showed that there was an over expenditure of appropriations in the general fund, but it could be that a budget adjustment just wasn't put in to the system. Disclosure forms, some of them were submitted electronically, and that file might have gotten misplaced. So we weren't able to review some of the economic disclosure forms. And we look at that to make sure if you guys have a business and you're working with the city, we want to know about that. So we can look at those expenditures, that sort of thing. Exactly. Keep as many as you can, yeah. I thought I might be able to log into the state system and get a copy of some of them, but I wasn't able to. I tried a couple weeks ago. Property disturbance bonds, this is not a huge dollar amount, but I think some people have put up property disturbance bonds, a contractor, and some of those date back 15, 20 years, maybe not 20 years, but 15 years. So either, you know, that project was completed and the bond wasn't needed, you could return it to the contractor, or the city had to do some work on those sites, and that's effectively city money. But right now, it sits in a liability account, essentially due back to the contractor, and we just think you can go through and clean that up and either write these contractors a check, or whoever, you know, could be a bank or whoever, or just get rid of that liability and let that become part of fund balance. It is, because you've had turnover in staff, yeah.
We've had turnover in staff, and this was actually something, I believe it was on last year's.
Yeah.
We're trying to get it cleaned up. Got them down a good ways, but they've changed people, they don't even know why we've got the money. Trying to figure out, we have very, very few projects now, usually somebody that there would be $1,000 worth of
I want to say 72,000.
Yeah, it's less than $100,000,
Yeah.
but it's just something just to clean up.
So you could probably spend a lot of that $72,000 just trying to,
Well,
Chasing it down.
chasing it down.
But we do want to get those cleaned up off our books. It's no point.
right.
Some of them are, I think we got one that's 31 years old or something.
It could be.
We are trying to get those off the books. Nothing, it's nothing to us, it's just money we're holding, from, like a bank. If you were
Like
behind
letters
us.
of credit.
Yeah,
but
letters
the
of, there you
opposite.
go, letters of credit, cash bonds, things like that, that we hold until the project. Well, nowadays, we release those as soon as we do our inspection. Things change, people change, our staff has changed, and the years.
Yeah, and well, yeah. So it is in It's just, we're cleaning up the balance sheet, so it's in cash, and then it's in a liability, they just offset one another. And to answer the question, if you can't find them, you're supposed to turn it over to unclaimed property, but probably what I would do is, we're showing this bond in the name of Wells Fargo, you know, we'd like for you to do research, if you would like to donate that money to the city, we'd be happy to accept it. So I think that's what I would probably do. Exactly, there's your splash pad. Post-employment benefit census data, you have post-employment programs, like if you allow someone to stay on your health insurance when they retire, that sort of thing. We have to test that data to make sure, you send a ton of information to an actuary tells you what your liability is based on future health costs and that sort of thing. We have to test the data you send, and so what we test is the birth date, are they male or female, that sort of thing. And we had some discrepancies there as we compared that information back to the payroll records. So I think we had 3 out of 40 we tested or something. Not a big deal, but something to get cleaned up. So we know that actuarial information coming back is as good as it can be.
Is that like just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can you elaborate on what those were? Were they,
Mainly birth dates were wrong, so the age was wrong on the person. No.
But are these data entry errors?
Yeah,
or
there's data
okay.
entry errors, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's just a confirmation that we need to make sure.
Just double check it, because ultimately they're sending back information saying your post-employment benefit liability is $2.4 million, and that gets put on your full accrual statements here. And if it's really 2.2, we want to, or if it's 2.7, we want to make sure it's the right number, so. Overall reconciliation of accounting systems, I believe that was starting to move forward this year, and then it was some issues with training or
Well, this has been something going on my entire time on council, and it's beyond that. We say that every year. But what can we really do to make this be the year?
yeah, I feel like this needs to be taken, I feel like
As soon as we get a couple of departments off the old system. Everything's on Munis except for, it's what's called an AS400, which is an IT.
cash sits, and I think that the tax assessments might be there as well. Yeah.
everybody on one
Tax tickets
system.
go out in May.
Ask at the end of March, how's that going?
Well, we've asked that every year, and every year's been the year. And then,
Well, this needs to be the year. I mean,
What other control do we have on that? Let's say March gets here and we're not there, and April gets here and we're not there. What can we do? I mean, it really is a problem because,
Departments that are giving you pushback.
IT's been working hard on this transfer. Some of it has been programs have changed. Difficult. Two city managers now.
I was going to say, it's years and years and years.
It started with my predecessor 2 or 3 years before. Program.
Right.
So it took a few years. Several times to do away with the S1 and we put everybody.
Got two departments left,
2 departments are left, yes.
and they are,
Commissioner of Revenue and Treasurer.
Set for training,
okay.
no assistance left, there is no support.
Okay.
If,
In years, because Munis. Dollars to change. Munis is a.
Well, it's specifically for governments, yeah. So we just have, yeah, we have a handful of systems, and you know, if you went to another system that wasn't Munis and then tried to, you're not really making any progress there. You wanted to,
It does feel a lot like Groundhog's Day. And I think the question that you were getting at, which, you know, I think we always come to is, what teeth do we have with the treasurer and commissioner of revenue if this does not occur? So
David,
that's
if-
the point I wanted
yeah.
everyone to understand,
right.
you know, so.
And if this does go down tonight, hypothetically, what kind of situation would that put the city in?
you have problems with tax collect, I mean, how are you gonna, you know, post tax payments and that sort of thing?
Right.
Do we know what? Do we know what barriers they're citing right now for not switching over? I know we've tried to, you know, we've tried to remove them, and I know,
It's fresh, I think it's been under pressure.
How about we bring them into a council meeting and have them tell us to the public and everybody why they do not want to do that? I'd love to know. And I've asked.
They don't want to switch.
You know, when you know something, you're used to something, and you
Yeah.
count on it, and they're saying, well, that's, because this is how. Complicating everything we do.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get carried away.
separate levels.
I cannot begin to tell you, if I can't know at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you look at 2 systems, plus your bank reconciliation. Operations, they'll trust that's what it's for. I mean, specialist you know, Munis.
We're gonna have to transition at some point.
I have to rely on
Well, I mean, the scary part from an audit standpoint, you're taking three systems: the school board, the city, and the treasurer's office, and they have to agree with one another. And so, you imagine, like I said a couple years ago, if you have a checkbook and your spouse has a checkbook, and you both write 20,000 checks a year, and you make deposits every single day, what are the chances those two systems are going to reconcile at the end of the year? Somebody's going to have made a mistake. So I think we've been fortunate that the variances we've had have been pretty small.
Well, but it's small at the end. During the year, those numbers can be in different places, correct? And we have to reconcile to figure out where we are, correct? Okay. So is there something wrong with the data from Munis? Is this old system, the AS400, better, that's giving us more accurate data? Or is Munis a legitimate system that you can say, this is actually where we are?
You know, I think the bank accounts are being reconciled to the AS400, but then journal entry, you're using journal entries to get your revenue into Munis, and then the expenditures are coming out of Munis. So if you're on one system, then if you have an error, you're going to find it when you do the bank reconciliation.
And when we switch to Munis, the bank account reconciliation
Exactly.
would happen with Munis like it does
Yeah, you
with
would
the
have to tie your
AS400.
bank reconciliation back to the Munis system. Right now, you tie it back to the AS400, then you try to reconcile the AS400 to the Munis system. So,
Does this date feel any different than any of the other dates? Feel like there's been progress made to actually transition over in April, or?
I do feel like progress is made, yeah.
Differences.
But in regards to the treasurer and the commissioner of revenue, when you speak with them now, do you see active steps now happening that we haven't maybe seen in the past? That-
Yeah, I think so. I think the commissioner's ready to go.
Can we follow up on that and see when the training is scheduled? Just
Yeah, it's in April. If he knows right offhand when the training. Sometime in April.
Well, how about this? Could we get the specific date for when the training's going to happen? And then maybe in February, ask both the commissioner and the treasurer to come talk with us to see, is there any reason that we won't go to this system this year and we'll be done with it? Okay?
Well, if there are any barriers, let us know now, so we can help facilitate the change.
I mean, we've said that before, but this has really got to change. This is causing problems.
Answer, I know we have an issue with.
These are my experts. I'm just a reader of the data.
But the support for the AS400 is non-existent now, correct?
There is one person. When there looks like something from, lights flashing and the tape spinning and the tapes. My understanding
Well, and I don't want to overstate this. I mean, this is a serious thing. This is a reconciliation thing, but it's not creating all of the issues the city faces,
Oh,
correct?
no, no, no,
Right.
but,
Right. 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 Right.
no, I think, in my mind, theoretically, when we get out a couple years from full implementation, then you're spending less time doing reconciliations of these systems. And now, it's gonna take time to get there, but ultimately, you can spend time doing other things that maybe are more beneficial.
Okay.
Everybody knows IT's done a great job of pushing the needs, equipment needs, conflicting equipment needs, programming aspects of it.
But Munis will work with our computer systems that we have. Yeah, so it's not like we need a special computer to run Munis, correct? Right. So that's a huge difference.
That means it's automatically backed up for you guys every night, then, isn't it? Munis is automatically backed up every night. Or it's probably stored on 3 different sites.
This is just like a burr under the saddle. It's been that way for a while, like forever. So,
If you go back, this comment is 18 years old.
It could be. It's been a while. It's been a while, and in fact, it'll,
but every year we've talked about it for at least the last 6 years, we've said, this is the year. And we thought, okay, and then it's not. And then it's, this is the year, and then it's not.
Last year, there was a technical glitch and some of the, so there was something that happened in Munis. So while we thought it was gonna be last year, it did take.
Okay.
In May or the June. So that's the other thing, is you gotta keep this go, I'm gonna do this tomorrow. You gotta work it in. so
No, I
it's
know.
In between,
But in 18 years, you'd think you could find a, you know, a couple months to do it. That's
you've also got
the thing.
utility billing that comes into play, the read times, and then the billing times, and then you've got the tax and,
Well, the thing is, though, is the city had that transition too, and we did a lot going on financially as well. So, I mean, it can happen. We just, that's why I just wanted to see if this year felt any different. And it sounds like there's training, which I don't know if training was ever scheduled prior, so I'm glad to hear that there's actually, you know, a training date and,
I do believe that just sitting down and talking, see what, like, what you're bringing up, just sit down and talk and go from there. Anything, I always found out that people feel validated. Whole career I've been doing a lot of that, so.
capital assets.
capital asset, and this is a tough one, but in the city's fixed asset listing, you've got, you know, some listings of land, parcel 37. Well, parcel 37, if you go to GIS, we can't find it. So I think at some point, maybe we free up some time. Somebody's going to need to do a reconciliation of all the land you own, and it's primarily land. I mean, the buildings have enough description. We know what building it is. It's primarily land. It's just not real clean. So I think the city needs to go through and try to match it up as best you can.
And these are a lot of little plots, correct?
Yeah, yes.
It's nothing substantial, like it's 100 acres in the city
Oh,
that we
no,
can't
no, no,
identify.
no, I don't,
this item is pretty close to, it's some unknown parcels that they're trying to figure out, so this one. It's been long enough, and I see Mike back there, he can help us, with, turn loose, we've talked about this a few times,
I think those are two different things. These are already on your fixed asset listing, and so these are parcels that you owned at some point. And so we just don't have a way to match them up to which parcel they
Physical
are.
location.
Yeah.
Like easements and things.
We don't know.
Well, the ones on the listing.
We have to
We
have
think you
owned
own
or we
all of
wouldn't
them.
have them.
Right.
Yeah.
But we don't know where they are. We don't know, yeah. Right, there's no link, so if you look the
There's a
land
big
up.
box of gold buried in one of these
Right.
pieces of property, and we're gonna
That would be
go
wonderful.
find it, and dig it up, and all problems solved.
But
All right.
I guess the index used on the fixed asset listing doesn't tie to the land records. So you see parcel 37, we try to find parcel 37 on the GIS. We can't find it. If we search City of Radford, we find a bunch of parcels you guys own, but trying to match them up with which one, it becomes difficult.
What we do on all I think it's 7 of these, all 7 of them, we, list the
Yeah, it's not that
Correct.
much.
The next couple pages is our required communication to those charged with governance, and it really just tells you about the major estimates in the financial statements. So those OPEB liabilities, your pension liabilities, those are estimates. Once somebody leaves, we don't know if they're going to participate in the OPEB or the Post-Employment Benefit Program. We don't know how long they're going to be on your retirement system. So we ultimately don't know how much you're going to have to pay out through VRS to that person. But those estimates are in there. If we had problems in the audit, we would also tell you about it here. So, you know, if staff didn't respond to our inquiries or something like that, we didn't have any issues. So you get the boilerplate letter in that regard. But just understand the financial statement does have estimates.
Before you get off of that, are we on more the conservative side, that we're kind of estimating for more benefits than we might actually accrue? Or are we more on the lean side, where that could be a lot bigger than we're thinking?
Well, I think you're right down the middle.
Okay.
So the discount rates that your actuaries use are typically going to be between 6 and 7%. They're discounting those future liabilities to today's dollars. So I think you're right down the middle.
Okay.
I don't think you're high or low.
Okay.
And really, that's it. And then we do put a copy of the adjusting entries that were recommended as part of the audit. If you see something that says PBC, that means it was proposed by the client, or, you know, so it was proposed by the city. So it's not really one of our adjusting entries. And the last page of this, I accidentally put a page of the school board's adjusting entries in there. So
Okay.
ignore the last page. So.
You've been looking at our books for a long time. The revenue issue is not something that's a brand-new thing to us, obviously.
Right.
When we look back to when the foundry closed. From an expense standpoint, have we been overly aggressive with our expenses considering our revenue? Or is this something that's just something we're going to have to look at on the revenue side to figure out where we go?
Well, I think David will have to probably tell you more about the expenditure side. I think expenditures are going to go up by 3 or 4% a year. Almost everywhere we audit, they go up by 3 or 4%. Now, recently, they've gone up by a lot more. But if you've got, and so that means your revenue has to grow by at least 3 or 4% a year in total.
But you don't see anything in our expense line that's just, you know, way out of
That-
whack or anything?
No, I don't see anything. But I think what I see over time, particularly if you've got a declining population, is that and I came from a town and they said, gosh, our expenses only go up 3% a year, but our fund balance is still going down. And it was all revenues. Revenues were going up at 2% a year, and that's because even though they were increasing rates, it just wasn't enough to overcome the decline in population. So I think that's what I see here. We've got a decline in population, whether it's students or residents. They're not going to, that means meals tax is not going to be as high. Even though you get a spike because restaurants are charging more now, you're not going to get that cost of living
Value of the
increase.
money, yeah.
Right. You're not going to get as many people eating out, that sort of thing. So it's just a slow drain, really.
But there's nothing that you see in our books, particularly looking at not just this year, but the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, that really stands out to you as a critical issue other than the fact that our revenues are not growing at the rate we need them to?
Yeah, I mean, mainly that's it. I mean, you can look at those graphs for water and sewer revenue, and electric revenue actually came down. Yeah, you've got, that's got to grow by 2 or 3% a year, just to maintain.
What other questions do you all have? This is the time to investigate, to say, are we doing it right or wrong?
There's a lot of information to look at in an extremely short.
Would you be available in a few weeks, should we need to have additional questions answered? Would that
Absolutely.
be helpful to everyone?
And my contact information,
It's
Yeah,
good information,
yeah.
and I appreciate, it's a lot to take in,
yeah.
so.
The- Yeah.
Ever to ask him about, his management?
So I guess us as a council, knowing that expenses are going to continue to increase 3 to 4% a year, how do we address it with revenues stagnant to declining without just taxing? That's, of course, a portion of it, but it seems like that's kind of where we're at as a council, is how do we try to merge those a little closer than what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, and the other thing, you know, in water and sewer, those are easier. You can say, we're going to have a rate increase of 6%, 7%, 10%, whatever it needs to be. General fund's a little tougher because a lot of that's state funding. So if your expenses are increasing by 3% a year, but your state funding is, say, 50% of your budget, and it's not increasing at all, that means local revenues have to increase by 6%.
Right.
So the general fund becomes a little trickier. Water and sewer is actually, water, sewer, electric is actually easier.
Budget to budget to budget, it is very tough while we're doing the budget.
Right. Well, and this year, we really didn't know until almost the fall, late in the fall. With that in mind, as part of that, well, I won't ask anything else. Bobby, do you have anything else?
No, I just want to say thank you for, I had a lot of questions until you came out here. Covered everything that, that I wanted to know, so, thank you.
You're absolutely
So,
welcome.
I'm
My
good.
pleasure.
No, I've been
You good?
asking as we've gone along.
Kelly, you good?
Yeah, I'm good for
Okay.
right now, thank you.
Yeah, and
Corbin, thank you so much. I know, for those of us, as we've done this, this is really helpful to try to understand where we are and to figure out where we're going. Is there anything else recommendation-wise, concern-wise, that you want to share with us in our last 10 or 15 minutes or so?
Well, I think I mentioned it a little bit, that after the Great Recession, what we saw was a decrease in funding, really from the federal government, but we also saw a drop-off in state aid. I don't know what's going to happen after COVID, but if that's any indication, you just got to think that's pretty likely, particularly for school boards. So what we saw there, school boards got a lot of federal funding during the Great Recession, and it just dropped off dramatically right after it. So how that may not play out next year or the year after, but over a longer period of time, I think that's going to play out, so.
I will say, again, I think job with our audit, he's helpful throughout the years. He's going to be one that I'll start figuring out. This is a reassessment year, so our assessment.
Oh, it's good.
It's really weird to make sure that we've got to bring that level tax rate in.
Right.
Since y'all know about what that might be, to double check me on that to be sure. Increase or whatever, decrease or leave it the same. That number, so he's always there to help us out, so.
Well, and I will ask you this, because your firm does a lot of these audits for most of the localities here in the New River Valley and agencies. Is there any reason that Radford would be able to be at such a different tax rate than some of our sister communities, significantly lower than, say, a Blacksburg or Christiansburg or Pulaski that offers similar services?
Yeah, no, there really isn't. I mean, plus you've got a lot that's non-taxable. Yeah, no, really, you should, if you look at a town and a county, you really, if you compare a city to a town, you have to add the county's tax rate.
Right.
I mean, because all those services, you guys provide all the services that the county and the town provide. So you have to add those two together. So, and off the top of my head, I don't know what Blacksburg and Montgomery County's tax rate is, but yeah, that's a comparable tax rate.
But if it's 15, 20, 30, 40 cents, whatever that range is, there's not a natural reason we would be that much cheaper,
No,
correct?
no,
Okay,
no, particularly in the same area.
right,
Uh,
okay.
So, yeah, you're right,
Okay.
good question, though.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
One quick thing, so, being with y'all 40 years, one of the things that's changed, started out economic development, one of the things that was big was rates, things like that. While that's still important, a lot of things have changed where people get more what we pay. Our tax rate, but look at the services that may be being provided. We are still providing every possible service that's out building, building process, and Melissa will know that. Effort, you get your building. Very lean process, very, all those kinds of things do add up. That fixation on being. DSS and the government side and constitutional officers. Library, it's not a whole lot of things. Pretty much your general fund is made
About
up
60,
of
yeah.
dollars we provide to the school system. That's the largest hit of the governmental county. Dollars minus
Thank you very
Oh,
much.
my pleasure.
We'll go on and take a 15-minute recess, and we'll get started back at 7 o'clock. Thank you.